Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're looking at media, something we're all pretty familiar with, right? But we're going to approach it through this fascinating character, Emma.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
at the heart of this piece called Sfrontian A, and her story really brings to life how media connects us all, informs us,
Yeah.
even empowers us.
You know what really struck me was how Emma engages with so many different kinds of media.
Right.
It's like she embodies how much media has changed, like from her grandfather's days with just the radio, to her world with 247 news and constantly being online.
Yeah, totally. Like you and I, we've lived through that shift too, right? Where media is just everywhere all the time. And the piece paints this picture of Emma. She starts her day with newspapers and coffee, catches the evening news, then she's diving into online discussions.
Yeah.
So I gotta ask, is she just like addicted to information? Or is there something more to it?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. See, Emma isn't just passively taking all this media in.
Right.
She's actually talking with her friend Sarah about how important it is to fact-check things and get different perspectives. They even talk about how to spot fake news online, which shows a real awareness of media,
It makes you wonder, is Emma just unusually aware of all the traps out there? Or are most of us just kind of blindly moving through this whole media world? What do you think?
Honestly, I think we can all learn from how proactive Emma is.
Yeah.
Think about like the algorithms that shape what we see online, right? They often put us in these filter bubbles where we only see stuff that agrees with what we already think.
Right.
But Emma is actively trying to break out of that.
Yeah, she's not getting stuck in that echo chamber.
Yeah.
But the piece doesn't only focus on like news and information. Emma's brother, James, he's a journalist, and he's super dedicated to sharing real, compelling stories with his community. It seems like there's a theme here.
Go ahead.
But how it's presented and who's sharing it.
Absolutely. The piece even talks about Emma's love for documentaries.
Oh, nice.
Specifically, one that totally captivated her about space exploration.
Okay.
Documentaries have this great way of blending storytelling with facts, which might be why she's so drawn to them.
Oh, that reminds me. I love documentaries too. They can really transport you to different worlds. I wonder if that's part of what Emma loves about them as well. But then there's also her love for podcasts, which is interesting because, well, it's a whole other medium. What do you think she gets out of listening to podcasts?
Podcasts offer this sense of intimacy, It's
Yeah.
almost like you're having a conversation with the host.
Right.
Maybe Emma enjoys that conversational style, especially compared to like the formal tone you get from traditional news.
Okay, so this leads us to a big question. How does Emma see media's role in shaping public opinion? There's this part where she goes to a debate about exactly this,
Oh, right.
where speakers talk about how media can bring people together but also divide them.
That debate really highlights something crucial, the ethical responsibility that comes with media. The piece doesn't shy away from the fact that media can be used for good or for bad.
Yeah.
It's like a powerful tool, one that needs to be used carefully.
So do you think Emma gets that potential for manipulation? She seems pretty media savvy overall, but maybe there's more to her perspective than we've seen so far.
Well, the fact that she attends that debate suggests she's thinking about these ethical issues. She isn't just blindly absorbing everything, she's thinking critically about the impact and the potential biases. And that brings us to another interesting part of Emma's story, how she actually participates in media.
Yeah, it's significant that she doesn't just consume, right? She actually gets involved, tries to shape things.
Exactly. And the piece gives us some really concrete examples of this. Like, we learned that Emma regularly writes letters to the editor for her local paper. What do you make of that? It seems a little old school these days, in the digital world.
Actually, I think it's pretty smart.
Okay.
And here's why. Letters to the editor often focus on super local stuff.
Things that might not be national news, but are huge for that community. So by writing these letters, Emma's participating in this hyperlocal media, engaging with her neighbors, maybe even influencing decisions right in her own area.
That's such an interesting way to look at it. Like using this traditional format to make a direct impact. And it reminds me of something else from the piece, Emma's dream of starting her own blog. Why do you think she wants to do that?
Well, the piece mentions how she's drawn to positive stories and interesting facts. Maybe she feels like there's a gap in what's out there, a need for more content that inspires hope and curiosity.
Yeah.
Almost like she wants to curate her own little corner of the internet where people can go to learn and feel good.
I love that idea. Like taking media into her own hands and saying, this is the kind of content I want to see more of.
Yeah.
But let's circle back to something you mentioned before, those ethical questions around media.
Right.
How do you think Emma handles all that?
Well, remember that debate she went to where they talked about media's power to both unite and divide? That really stuck out to me because it shows Emma wrestling with these tough questions.
Right.
She's not just naively believing everything she sees. She knows there can be bias, manipulation, even harm.
So how does she sort through all that? Does the piece give us any hints?
There's this line where Emma says something like, seeking truth even when it's uncomfortable.
Ooh.
That really resonated with me. It suggests she's willing to grapple with tough ideas and be critical of information, even when it's from sources she trusts.
Which is so important nowadays, right? With misinformation spreading online so easily. Sounds like she's actively being skeptical, which is probably smart for all of us. But it also makes me wonder, does all the negativity, all the conflicting stuff ever get to her?
That's a good question. And honestly, I think we all struggle with that a bit. The piece doesn't hide the fact that media can make us anxious, even despairing, especially when it's all about conflict and disasters and problems. But I think Emma focusing on positive stories and how she actively engages with media suggests she's found ways to cope.
Like she's consciously looking for the good, even amidst all the bad. Brings me back to her brother, James, the journalist. Do you think his work influences how she sees media?
I think it definitely plays a part.
Mm-hmm.
The piece describes James as super committed to ethical journalism, to finding the truth and sharing stories that matter. So maybe Emma's learned from watching him,
Yeah.
seeing how much dedication and integrity it takes to do good journalism.
Makes sense. Like she's got this insider view of how media works, the good and the bad. But how does all this translate into action? We know about the letters, the blog she wants to start, but does she do anything else to make a difference through media?
That's where things get really interesting. The piece hints that Emma's part of a local group that's using social media to raise awareness about some environmental issue.
Wait, what are they focused on? Tell me more.
Well, it seems they're worried about this proposed development project that could harm a local park. So they're using social media to organize protests, share information about the environmental impact, even connect with lawmakers to voice their concerns.
So they're leveraging digital media to rally their community and push for change. That's really sharp. Fits perfectly with Emma's belief in using media for good. But what about the challenges? Social media is great for activism, but it also has its own set of problems, right?
Absolutely. The piece doesn't ignore that. This group is dealing with online harassment, misinformation campaigns, and just the sheer difficulty of getting their message heard above all the noise on social media.
Yeah, it's a constant fight for attention and credibility.
Right.
So how do they navigate all that? Are they using any specific strategies or tools to deal with the misinformation and make sure their message gets through?
That's where it gets tricky. The piece doesn't go into detail about their tactics. But it mentions they're working with a media literacy organization to learn about things like fact-checking, spotting fake accounts, and building a solid online presence that's harder to manipulate.
So they're not just randomly posting stuff. They're learning how to use these platforms strategically and ethically. That's great to hear. But what about results? Did their social media campaign actually help protect the park?
It's not a clear-cut yes or no.
Okay.
The developers did end up scaling back their plans, partly because of the pressure from the group and all the media attention they got. It's a partial victory. It shows the power of people coming together and using media strategically.
So not a total win, but still significant. They made a real difference. Pretty inspiring. But what about the impact on Emma herself? We've talked about how she knows about the downsides of media, like misinformation and feeling drained from being constantly online. Did she experience any of that firsthand?
The piece hints at some of those struggles. Emma mentions feeling overwhelmed sometimes by all the negativity and nastiness online, especially from people who are against protecting the park.
Right.
Shows that even campaigns with good intentions can attract trolls and bots and people who just want to cause trouble.
Yeah, seems like anything that gets attention online is going to get some negativity too. But how did Emma handle that? Did it get to her, or did she find ways to stay positive? We're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into Emma's world. And I'm really curious to see how she navigates this whole online world, with all its complexities.
Well, what's interesting is she seems to approach online stuff with the same thoughtful approach we've seen offline.
Right.
Remember how she and Sarah were talking about fact-checking and getting different perspectives?
Yeah.
It seems like that carries over to how she acts online, too.
Right. She's not just mindlessly scrolling, getting caught up in all the clickbait. The piece mentions she's part of these online communities. One is even a forum for discussing documentaries.
Ah.
I wonder if that's another way for her to connect with people who share her interests.
Yeah.
Really dive deeper into those topics she loves.
Yeah, like building her own learning network,
Mhm.
tapping into the knowledge of others to learn more. And that connects to something we haven't talked much about Emma as a creator. The piece mentions she finally started that blog she was dreaming of.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The one where she wanted to share those positive stories and interesting facts. So what's it like? Does it tell us more about how she sees media?
It's called Emma's Eye Opener.
Cute.
And it's this really cool mix of like her personal thoughts, news articles she finds interesting, even some photos she's taken.
Wow.
She seems to be playing with different formats, which makes sense given her creative side.
I love that title, Emma's Eye Opener. Totally fits her goal of helping people see things in new ways. But keeping up a blog is a lot of work. Do you think she's found an audience? Is it having the impact she wanted?
That's a good question. And the piece doesn't give us a definite answer. But there's this part where Emma gets an email from a reader who says her blog really helped them through a rough time.
Uh-huh.
So it seems like her writing is connecting with at least some people, which is great.
It really shows how even something small, like sharing your thoughts, can have a big impact on someone else. Reminds us that we can all be media creators. Our voices, even if they seem small, can make a difference. But Emma's journey hasn't been easy, especially with that social media campaign she was part of.
Right. The one to protect that park. Remember, we were left wondering if they'd succeed.
Yeah.
Well, the piece gives us a little more info on what happened.
Okay, so did they save the park?
It's not a simple yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
The developers ended up changing their plans a bit, partly because of the pressure from the group and all the media coverage they got. It's kind of a partial victory.
Okay.
Shows what can happen when people work together and use media well.
So not a complete win, but still a big accomplishment. They changed things in their community, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious about how this affected Emma personally. We talked about how she knows the downsides of media, the misinformation, the emotional drain of being constantly plugged in. Did she experience any of that?
Yeah, the piece does hint at of those struggles.
All right.
Emma talks about feeling overwhelmed sometimes by all the negativity online, especially from people who didn't want to protect the park.
Right.
It reminds us that even good campaigns can attract trolls, people who just want to stir up trouble.
Makes sense. Like anything that gets attention online is going to get some of that.
Yeah.
But how did she deal with it? Did she find ways to stay strong, to not let it get to her?
There's this scene where Emma's talking to James, her brother, about feeling burnt out from the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
He gives her some good advice, tells her she doesn't have to respond to every nasty comment, that it's okay to take breaks from social media, and that focusing on the positive impact of her work can help her feel better. Such good advice. It's so important to take care of ourselves, especially online. It's easy to get swept up in it all and forget our own well-being. But it sounds like Emma has found a way to balance her passion for media with taking care of herself.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the big question of our deep dive. What can we learn from Emma and how she approaches media?
I think her story shows how important it is to be an active, informed media consumer. Someone who thinks critically, seeks out different viewpoints, and isn't afraid to have thoughtful conversations. But she also shows us the power of being a media creator. Someone who uses their voice, their platform, to share stories, connect with others, and even fight for positive change.
I couldn't agree more. Emma's story reminds us that we all have a role in shaping the media landscape, online and off. It's a call to be more intentional, more discerning, more empowered in how we interact with the media all around us.
That's a great way to put it. So, to our listener out there, here's a final thought as you navigate this ever-changing world of media. Remember Emma. Embrace being both a consumer and a creator. Use media wisely, connect meaningfully, and never forget the power it has to make a positive difference in the world. Until next time.